Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. We're a father-son business podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And one of the biggest problems you got is when you're living in the desert and finding water. Camden, what is happening down in hot zona today?
It's hot. It's hot. We're getting some rain. Not enough to cool it down, though. We're sitting at a nice, good 110 just about every day now. So nice and cool. So make sure you guys come down and visit.
I don't know what you're complaining about. It could be worse. You could be in Phoenix.
Oh, yeah,
Man.
115.
Yeah. Well, you know what, folks? That's what happens when you put concrete on the ground. Concrete's a great reflector, I can tell you.
Yeah.
And an absorber, too, because, damn, it don't cool off. And, by the way, folks, we are joined by my next-door neighbor, next door up the road just a bit, Michael Mitchell. Hey, Michael, see, I knew I'd do that, even though it's in the script. Anytime I ask, what's your name? And it ain't your name. And then my mind says, well, don't call him by his real name. Don't call him by what his mother said to call him. Call him whatever you want, Otis.
Well, I as a kid, I went by Mike. And then, I don't know, I think my last couple of years in the Navy or college, at some point, it's like, do you go by Mike or Michael? And I said, well, if you're a lady, it's Michael, right? Then it finally just became all Michael, except for two people. And you can never correct your parents. They can call me whatever they want.
Yes,
and trust me, they do.
Yes, sir. They're the ones that wrote it on the paper.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, it's funny you say that, though, because I tried the whole two different names. I had something weird idea in my head that if I could keep things straight, if the ladies called me by my middle name and all the guys called me by my first name, that made great sense as an 18-year-old kid. No, that don't work. So, speaking of Navy, tell me something that you learned in the aviation space that is driving you still today. It's like your go-to. Or I don't know why I said aviation space, but in the broader Navy, who was that senior chief or the drill that taught you something that you still go back to?
Well, but aviation is you're on the right theme because I worked on F-18s. I joined the Navy to work on planes. That's what I knew I wanted. That and travel. I grew up watching too many John Wayne movies.
So you believe that whole thing of join the Navy and see the world thing?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Oh my God.
Hey, Camden has some property in Arizona for you. I'm just saying.
I loved it. No, I'm serious. I mean, I'm first gen college, which I did after the Navy, but I mean, blue collar, right? My dad worked for City Light, driving the trucks, delivering the telephone poles. My mom was stay at home mom. I wanted to travel. I really did. And I'm not kidding. I watched all those John Wayne World War II movies, right? In fact, I decided I always wanted to get into a John Wayne type bar fight. Unfortunately, I decided to do it at a Thai boxing club in Bangkok.
Oh, crap.
So, yeah, I think we all know how that ended. But so I worked on F-18s. I was on USS Midway. The squadron was VFA 192. And I worked on a flight deck. I was an airframe mechanic. And then I transferred to Moffett Field Naval Air Station with VP 40. Worked on P3s, and then I got called up for Desert Shield, and I was with the A6B squadron. But I'm VFW eligible because when I was on the Midway, we were Operation Earnest Will, which is I call it pre-Gulf. Yeah. Right? We're doing figure eights in the Gulf during the Iran-Iraq War. So, there's a senior chief I remember. I don't know if this is really fair. Names will be withheld to protect the guilty. But he was my senior chief in the squadron in Japan, and I ran into him in California a couple years later, and I was like, "Hey, senior, hey man, where's that $20 you owe me?" He's like, "What? Oh my God, I'm so sorry." He went for his wallet, and I couldn't keep a straight face, right? And I started laughing. I was just pulling his chain, but then I realized that you've got to maintain your for lack of a better word, integrity with people, right? And because people ultimately really do want to do the right thing. And I also thought relationships are important. He remembered me, and this was years later, right? And it's a big Navy, right? Although a small, aviation community. But then I think about that here in Denver in the veteran community and also in the business community. It's a small community, and relationships are first. And yes, you can pull a joke now and then.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you said something I thought was really interesting too, and that's that relationship and maintaining relationships. And I'm fascinated just the fact that the senior chief actually remembered you. I still,
So was I.
I mean, because I know that, in the positions I held, there was a lot of guys under me that I met and would probably knew them, maybe most definitely recognized them, and maybe knew their name back then. But
well, I'm trying not to dwell on why he remembered me or how.
Well, you were one of those kind of sailors, huh?
Did talking about the maintenance side, talking about working on the planes there, is that a little bit of your approach of maintenance when it comes to things? Because I think that's a really interesting distinction. A lot of people like to build things. Not that many people like to maintain things. Were you someone who likes to tinker and likes to maintain your whole time?
I find it truly frightening when I get on an airplane to fly that people like me are working on these airplanes.
Okay.
No, I'm serious. Because after I got out of the service, I'm from the Northwest. I was working at Alaska Airlines. Mm-hmm. And I saw some of the people. There's a reason why in the military you have step-by-step instructions on everything. Let's just put it that way. Mm-hmm. So no, I'm not really I never really thought of it that way. I just like aviation. I like planes. I really do. I love warbirds. When I got out, I volunteered to restore a B-29 for a little bit at Boeing Field. So I'm the guy that goes to the air show and I paint. I sketch and watercolor the planes.
That's really cool to get to work on a B-29 and do that. What an experience to touch that kind of.
They were tougher. They were tougher back then.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Made them. It's kind of like I grew up working on my own car, right, and helping Dad work on the old Falcon. I can remember the Ford Falcon that we had, and then the Scout that I had, and just climbing up into the engine compartment because there wasn't all this other stuff in there. It was they were tougher and they were simpler, and it was easier to work on it. How does that shape when you started your engineer career? How did that shape your engineer career? Going from
none whatsoever. I mean, I was just an airframe. I was a mechanic, but a plane captain. When I got out in the 90s, it was I think maybe it was a different time for veterans back then compared to today.
Yeah.
These last 10 years. But I figured I'd be a cop. That's what vets did. Right.
Yeah.
So I got a 2-year baby cop degree. Did the internships and the ride-alongs, and I was going through the selection process, and I was doing a ride-along with a Seattle PD cop, and he said, "Are you married?" I'm like, "Well, no, not that I'm aware of." And he's like, "Well, don't get married for 5 years." Why? Well, in 5 years, she's going to divorce the asshole. You might as well wait, and she can marry the asshole. I was like, "Check, please." But when you think about it, all they do is negativity all day long.
Oh.
Right? I mean, the last couple of years aside, and yes, there's bad actors and with any industry, any job, but they see negativity all day long, and that's gotta change you. And I'm kind of not that way. I'm more of a positive, outward going guy. So I thought, okay, now what am I going to do? Transfer to UW, and I got a political science degree. And I ended up getting a job at United Parcel Service as I was graduating. After I graduated, in the back of the trailer, throwing boxes. And yes, they do throw them. And then they had a strike in the 90s. And but at this point, when they went on strike, I had gotten a full-time sales job for UPS. So I was considered management. So I had to drive a truck. And then when the strike was over, this is, again, 97. No one's going to stick around for $5.50 an hour.
No.
They all left. And so I'm back in the trailer again. along with others. And they had this deal with some of these day laborers. If someone sticks around for 30 days, they get, $600. So they were just throwing people over like cattle, and they had no idea what they were being sent over for. And they're all, if you've ever been in a UPS or a FedEx hub, it's a loud, busy environment. You got machines, conveyor belts, yelling. It's for those who've never been in it, it's like, oh my God. And these people are just like a tight group. And one guy, I'm not making this up, he looked like Burl Ives. He was in a 3-piece suit. He had a white, beautiful, a manicured beard. And I'm like, I'm not getting out of here until my replacements come in. Mm-hmm. And so I call her my pre-wife, now wife for 25 years. We wrote a memo that night saying we're to go to find people. And I sent it in HR. And I got transferred the next day. I've been recruiting ever since. Straight up. Yeah.
I got to ask, just because this popped into my head. I have not been at a FedEx hub or any sort of facility like that. I'm picturing that scene in Elf when he's down in the mailroom, except about 100 times bigger. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, it's just boxes are everywhere. People are yelling. When you load a UPS trailer with the packages, it's just like Tetris. Because UPS is really, really good at logistics and efficiency on space. I mean, with their drivers, we're getting off track a little bit. They're measured how far when they step off the truck, how far their first step is from the truck, right? Wow. UPS trucks do not take left turns. Yeah. It's always a right turn to save time and fuel, and that all adds up. That's how they are, right?
Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty intense.
I mean, I guess it makes sense though.
And I saw your face. I saw your face there too, Dad. It also like 90% of accidents or something crazy like that come from left turns. Also, it's like it is one of those weird we only make rights, and you're like, okay, that's a stupid little thing, and it is a game changer for delivery stuff. It's weird.
Yep.
Well, and you think about normalizing. It's that whole thing of normalizing your business or creating an efficient system across all of UPS. And if each truck is saving a gallon of fuel and the thousands of trucks out there, I mean, that just, it's the same thing in the aviation, right? In commercial airlines, they trim a little bit of, that angle and their speed and all those sort of things. And they save, 100 gallons of jet fuel per flight. I mean, that adds up quick.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I did in my senior year in college, Wall Street loves fancy titles. I was the director of marketing for a vice president at Smith Barney. Oh. And so my role was to fill in the conference room monthly so we can come in and say, hey, invest your money with me. Mm. Right. And it was interesting because the first 3 days, my job is to cold call, and I never cold called before. And so on my podcast, the last question I ask all my guests is, what's the worst job you've ever had? And what positive aspect of it do you still use today? And for me, it was that job. Yeah. I learned how to cold call. And for 3 days, I couldn't wait to get off the phone. Hi, my name's Michael Mitchell. Okay, thank you. Bye, click. And then go get a glass of water, go to the head, tie my shoe, and do it all. And to his credit, he let me do this for 3 days. Mm. And finally, he said, if you don't get over your fear of the phone, you're done. Not just here, but in business. I was like, oh, shit. And I'm riding the elevator down, and I realized I could have called any of these people in this elevator car. Mm-hmm. It's a phone. They can't hurt me. Mm-hmm. Right? And then also, who's to say I'm not providing a value? I mean, I was whale hunting. This is in 96, 97. So his minimum investment level was $350, which is basically $900,000, $1 million in today's dollars. Mm-hmm. Right? So who's to say I'm not providing a value? And so you fast forward to what I do today, both for my day job as an executive search and for fundraising and that stuff. It's all about picking up the phone. It's all about outreach. So those are the two things that really influenced me when I got out of the service. Yeah.
what kind of lessons have you applied from, talking either commercial air or with like FedEx? I'm just picturing being a part of any huge organization, like those kind of logistics and things. There's got to be lessons everywhere. What are some of those lessons that you've applied since then?
For me, it was some people shouldn't work for others. UPS is a big company. Mm-hmm. Some people like working for a big company, and some people don't. So, that was, in a way, that's not fair to say for UPS, because UPS I retract all of that for UPS. Okay. UPS actually gave me the freedom to fly my freak flag. Because when I started recruiting for them, I said, and again, this is in the 90s before Craigslist and the internet. Okay. So bear with me. There is a weekly magazine called The Stranger, and this is in Seattle. And Seattle in the 90s was, it was a much different city than it is today, right? Soundgarden, Nirvana was all up and coming bands, right? I mean, the grunge scene was Seattle. Oh, yeah. And Amazon was still, Jeff Bezos' little darling idea. He was advertising still at the footer of the New York Times, saying the biggest bookstore on the planet, right? And, we had to hire people because no one's going to, find a part-time person for $5.50 an hour, even with full benefits, is tough. And UPS traditionally would just put out a sandwich board on a college campus and wait for people to come in the room. Mm-hmm. I would get on the other side of the table and engage with people. And it was like, hey, come talk to UPS. I guess I was always kind of outgoing. And I said, we need advertising The Stranger because you want college students for these jobs. No way. We're going to get people with dog collars and mohawks applying because, UPS is a conservative trucking company at the end of the day. And the reason why they're saying this is The Stranger was infamous for its classified section in the back of the paper. So there were very explicit ads, couple seeking man, couple seeking woman, men seeking men, other seeking other. That was always my favorite. Yeah. And yes, there was an ad for a dwarf in that, but the thing is, every college student in the Northwest grabbed this thing on Thursday night when it came out because that told you what you were going to do for the weekend. Mm-hmm. The music scene, plays, acts, stand up, you name it. If you're a college student, that told you what you're doing this weekend. And they wouldn't run the ad. I did it on my own. I called up their ad department. We created this 50s clip art type of an ad. I smacked it right in the middle of the sex ads. And I didn't tell anybody I did it. Oh gosh! And this is the same time I'm going to the unemployment offices and I'm providing resume writing workshops and mock interviews to people on welfare, so they can come in and get a job at UPS. Again, part-time, full benefits. Mm-hmm. And then I bring like a busload of Russian immigrants with green cards. I mean, I was just looking for ways of finding people to work at UPS. Mm-hmm. And I ran the ad in the paper. And the next day, sure enough, the line went around the block. And the interviewers kept saying, where'd you hear about us? And no one would say because of where it was located at. And they finally, the interviewers figured it out, went to the head of HR, Betty Welsh. And she ran HR for the entire Washington State District and, complained about me. And she brought me in and she was chuckling. She's like, just keep doing what you're doing. Unfortunately, the guy who complained got transferred to the airport. I felt bad about that. And they just let me do my thing. They really did. They gave me the freedom to experiment on where to find people. And fortunately for me, it paid off. We got applicants and we were hiring people. I mean, I think I hired like an all lesbian shift because I was hitting the lesbian bars. And see, again, this is Seattle in the 90s, right? It had a major diverse population compared to San Francisco, right after San Francisco, because I was just looking to hire people, right?
Getting the job done, right?
Yeah, I had fun, and that's when I discovered. Wait a minute, there's a career getting people jobs, and that's when I got hooked. And I started doing their IT searches and their sales searches, and then we moved out to Denver in '98. I interviewed UPS to transfer. And they just took too long. By the time they got back to me, I had a couple other offers. But Betty had said something that was interesting at the time when I was in Seattle. She said, I said that for my performance review. And she's like, Michael, you're not going to be here in a year. Why are you firing me? Am I on plan? She's like, no, we're never going to promote you at the pace that you deserve or you think you deserve because we're still a trucking company. And coincidentally, she was right. We decided to move to Denver to buy a home, and I ended up getting into IT.
This episode of the Cam and Otis Show is brought to you by Evergood Adventure Wines. Our loyal listeners know Evergood's founder, Matthew Hexter, from his appearances on the show that never disappointed, and Evergood Adventure Wines doesn't disappoint either. Evergood is a craft winery from Colorado that makes wine from lemons, not grapes. Picture adult lemonades, perfect for your next backyard barbecue or hanging out with friends at the beach or the pool. No need to drink a warm red grape wine when it's 100 degrees out or hotter here in Tucson. Evergood Over Ice is the perfect refreshment for a hot summer day. They come in a variety of flavors, including lemon, strawberry, lime, grapefruit, and watermelon. These non-carbonated wines check all the boxes. Gluten-free, vegan, low sugar, and low in sulfites. Best of all, they taste damn good and they have fun names. Like their OG lemon wine called Skierpie. Yep, you heard that one right. And I'll tell you, Skierpie is one of my favorites. Evergood ships to 41 states, so you can order your lemon wines online at evergoodadventurewines.com. Plus, Matthew is offering 20% off for our listeners. Just use promo code CAM-OTIS at checkout to get 20% off and start enjoying these amazing lemon wines. Go to evergoodadventurewines.com and click Buy Now to redeem your Cam and Otis Show exclusive.
What is it about that the hiring of people? Is it the problem solving? Or is it the helping people, or is it something else?
No, it's actually a combination of all that, right? One, I like community building. Mm-hmm. Two, I like matching people up. I really do. When you're hiring, people make a change. It's usually there's an increase in comp involved somehow. So I dig that. But I like looking for, helping people getting into a better situation. And I like helping hiring executives, build out their team. I do like problem solving. Hey, we've had this search open for X amount of time. We just can't get anybody for it, right? I'm in conversations with a client to hire someone in a very remote part of the Southwest, and he's just like, look, it's the middle of nowhere, and yada yada yada. I'm like, oh, you're just baiting me now. You just, right? Because it sounds like a really hard search. Yeah. So it's got me leaning in. So I'm really excited about it. Because as we were talking, I was just thinking about, okay, you're in the middle of nowhere in Arizona. It's like a cool day in August is 115, right? But what your organization's mission is and the population it serves is really important. I want to help you find this person because that person's out there. Absolutely. So
is it the tougher fill, the unicorn that you thrive on, as opposed to, hey, we need 100 folks to do
right? Yeah, we call it in search. You call it the purple squirrel. I don't know where it came from, but that's what it's called. Yeah,
purple squirrel. Okay,
I like doing that. I really, really do. It's a one-off. It keeps the blood flowing.
Is it because that feeling of nobody else can do this, or nobody else has gotten it done, sort of thing, and I'll show you?
Well, it's because this resource is needed to help the organization continue serving its demographics, its population, its constituents, and that's really important, right? So if it's helping, I guess you ask it about the military, it goes back into mission success and execution, right? There is no one person that does it all. It's a team. It's a team win.
So
no matter what the situation is.
Yeah, go ahead, Cam.
Oh, just we got to the point of the story where we were in Denver. What was it that drove you back to the veteran community and started to apply those skills in that group?
Oh God. So this is back in 2002. We're driving down. For those who are familiar with Denver, Bannock Street, and we see this sign. It's this neon sign that says VFW Post 1. And my wife is reading this book called Bowling Alone about, how we're no longer a nation of joiners. Mm-hmm. And she's like, do you think that's the first one ever? I'm like, I have absolutely no idea. I'd never literally had stepped foot in the VFW before. So I went in. Sure enough, it's the historic first VFW, established in 1899, first of many. And so I take my brother-in-law there, who's an Army vet, and I went for the $1.25 Jack and Cokes. Not so much on the Coke. And then one day the doors are locked, and there's a sign saying that our charter's been suspended. Special meeting on yada yada. Charter suspended. What? So I go, and me and two other people ask the most questions. So you know how that ends. And you know what Navy stands for, don't you?
No.
Never again volunteer yourself.
Oh, yes.
So it was George, Izzy, and I, and we're taking the helm with this charter being suspended, which is basically like going in receivership. What happened is the prior generation had kind of run into the ground, and there was a 6-figure debt. I mean, this is not a unique story within the VFW ecosystem, right? And so what happens is the charter gets suspended. The state VFW level comes in and takes over, and they run it, and they work to build you back up. Okay, but back then, I think it's changed since then. When a VFW goes under, that number goes back into circulation. So a little inside baseball: the American Legion, their numbers post one is in each state. So there's an American Legion Post 1 off of Evans here in Denver. There's an American Legion Post 1 in Nebraska, Kansas, etc. In the VFW, it's unique globally. There's only one Post 1. There's only one Post 2099, right? So what we didn't really understand what was happening back then, because we're new to the VFW. Neither one of us had done anything prior to this, was that there was a post in Ohio that says that they're really the first VFW post. So they were trying to get our number when we were suspended. So we didn't know this was even happening. And I think I'm really glad I didn't know that, because I don't know what I would have how I reacted. But we got it back and we reopened. But we were ultimately forced to sell the building because we just didn't have the membership to support it. And we still had this debt, and the building was costing money to run and needed to be improved. And frankly, this is not the first time the Post has been in this kind of situation. In the late 80s, they were in a beautiful building that was literally next door. I seen the postcard. They moved into it in 49. But again, they couldn't. The building was being supported by a Chinese restaurant called the Lotus Room. And when the family retired, that turns out that's what was keeping the building afloat. So they decided to sell the building. And they did a cash land swap with the property next door, which is the building I knew. By this point, that original building was gone. It's now actually a high rise. Otis, if next time you drive through Denver, you see the park off Spear. That's it. Site. Any rate. So we couldn't afford the building, and we didn't have. I remember going on a meeting on Saturday. I'm in my early 30s. I'm like, God, I hope we don't have 6 people as quorum, because I want to go biking or hiking or skiing, depending on what time of the year it was. And we sold the building. And then Izzy is leading it. Now we got 7 figures in the bank. We paid off the debt. And we're basically homeless. We're bouncing around different locations, other VFWs, the Denver Press Club, a bar, just to have the meetings. And then I realized one day there was like 25, 30 people in the room. And they're all new faces. Izzy was hitting the college campuses, because now we're getting vets coming back from Iraq. So the student veterans were starting to show up. He had reached out to reserve units, so they were coming. And then one day, finally, he's like, "Hey, Michael, I've been doing this for 5 years. I'm done. Will you take over?" Because I've been bouncing between the senior and junior role. And I was like, not really. But we had all this capital. And I had to preserve that capital, because if the institution of the historic first post was going to survive, we had to come up with a permanent solution. So I said, okay, but only if we run it like a nonprofit, not like a VFW, which I had done neither before. And my mandate was to find a building. And so my first, X amount of months, we looked at property and we picked up a space over on 8th and Santa Fe here in downtown Denver. And it's right in the middle of the art district. So organically we became a veteran art gallery, and I created we brought in another vet group, and they really helped us clean out the building and kind of prove the model. Ultimately, we ended up creating the Veterans Arts Council. So it's led by veterans who are artists. And so 80% of the art on the wall is by veterans. And we allot 20% for the draft dodgers. So, it's our commitment to being part of the community.
Wait. 20% for the draft dodgers. What?
I'm on the selective service. So but for civilians, for non-veterans, right? And most galleries, when you're an artist and you bring your stuff in, they charge you 40 to 60% commission. We charge 5 or 10% for veterans and like 10, 20% for the civilians.
Could you talk a little bit about just like, and so speaking of civilians there, I know what a VFW is. I've been to the one in Colorado Springs. Shoot, I used to go swing dancing there. Could you talk about what a VFW actually is, what the mission is? Because that's an area that like I don't really know. I know there are these buildings everywhere, but that's about it.
Well, now you're opening a whole can there. So what? I don't know how to respond to that, because are you talking about what the VFW was back in the day, what it became, what ours is, or what most others are? Because those are all very different answers.
I think let's start with what it was meant to be, and then we can skip that middle jump to what you are now.
So at least for us, when we started in 1899, it was returning vets of the Spanish-American War. Mm-hmm. And they were all guys, right? The Colorado First Volunteers, which is today's Colorado National Guard. There's a plaque in the first floor of the Capitol saying this is where it all started. We held our organizational bylaw meetings on the 8th floor of the Brown Palace. And it was really, and this is going to sound familiar, they were, General Irving Hale saw his guys coming back and having a hard time transitioning and adjusting, being back home and getting jobs and being in the community, right? So it started off as that, helping them. And then, again, this is back in the turn of the century, Masonic lodges were big, the Elks Lodge, the Rotary. We were a nation of joiners, and people come together and support each other and do business, right? That was when, hey, I'm on the board and I'm also a Rotary member, and let's give him the contract. Mm-hmm. That's when, right?
Oh yeah.
So that's really where it started. But then, personally, I think that when TV came to be, the VFW started to gradually shift to be more of a bar, right? And we became less of joiners. And so that's when things started to really shift. And I think the Vietnam War was probably what set the VFW on the course that it's on today. That, again, this is my personal humble opinion. Mm-hmm. The VFW, when the vets came back from Vietnam, I've heard multiple stories from different Vietnam vets who said they went to their VFW, and the World War II guys were literally like crapping on them. They weren't welcome as fellow veterans, right? It was, you're not fighting a good war like we did. Keep in mind, it was a much different time in America back then, right? And so all the Vietnam vets mostly went to the American Legion. When I was leading Post 1, I still struggled to get Vietnam vets. And this is I led Post 1 from 13 to 16. I still struggled to get Vietnam vets to join Post 1 or come.
Wow.
That's how deep that resentment was and still is.
Wow.
So, I think that, Camden, the answer to your question is there is no one answer. Mm-hmm. It's really just depends on who you're talking to about that and what time frame. Because you fast forward to the last, 10 years or so, we started doing programs and outreach. And we tried to, we had a party that was Vietnam themed for our Vietnam vets. Sandbags and all. We have a founders dinner, and it goes back to 1899, and it's every year. I got Anne Margaret to come to one of the dinners, and we did a private cocktail reception just with her and the Vietnam vets. And some of those guys brought the photo that she signed for them in country in 68.
No way. That is.
I'm really getting goosebumps just telling the story.
So am I.
And,
that's
Rob McDonald came. Bob McDonald, the Secretary of the VA, came because he's a Vietnam vet. It was. I went from being like, "Hey, Michael," to like, "Hey, it's time to go. We got to shut this down. It's time to go to the dinner." to being booed just like that because they wanted to hang out with Aunt Margaret the whole night. But we do other events. So we were trying to look, have a reason for people to come to your VFW, and we don't have a bar. And so in this new building we're in, and keep in mind this thing was a fixer-upper to say the least. I mean, the bathroom was an indoor privy. I'm not exaggerating, but we made it work. In fact, in some ways, I'm very fond of those days because we'd have these massive working parties to gut the building out. We get 50 people to come, right? But we started doing events. We did yoga. We had, we'd find out why people wouldn't come to the meetings. Well, I've got kids. It's after work. It's school. So we found in the auxiliary a retired art school teacher. She came in and she was giving art classes to the kids in the other room while the mom and dad are in the meeting. Bring your dog, try before you buy, technically by the bylaws, you have to be a member to stay for the whole thing unless you're a guest. So if you're there, you're a guest of the commander, right? Check it out. Stay for the whole thing. People would come and not come back. And I'd follow up and say, well, why didn't you come back? You guys, it's like church. There's 7 or 9 prayers up and down. So we went to Ray, who had joined the Post in 51. He was sworn in by one of the founders of the VFW. Holy crap. He'd been our chaplain for 30 years. And we said, look, we want to make these changes. And we literally got his blessing, right? So we skimmed it down to the opening prayer, the closing prayer, and if someone passed away, right? That place was hopping. We were getting 90 people coming to a meeting. But you have to have a reason. You can't just come to have a meeting. You got to have a reason. And so we had lots of socialization. Again, no bar, right? We ultimately did put in a saloon for First Friday, and that thing brings in $5-10 grand on one night, right? But you have a reason. Programming. It's all about the programming. Build it, and they will come. And trademark that.
Yeah. Well, that's so true though, because the bar, the cheap drinks, the $1.25 Jack and Coke, if you will, gets them in the door. But what gets them coming back, right? And actually doing something. What's
interesting is that after a working party, we'd bring in a keg, right? Mm-hmm. And we okay, kegs tapped, but maybe 4 people, 5 people, but a majority of them wouldn't even go for the beer. That's very telling.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that bar model is literally dying off.
Yeah, well,
most VFWs and American Legions rely on that till to keep them afloat.
Well, and look at what's happened on all our military installations. The officers' clubs, the enlisted club, the Chiefs Club, all those things. There are same things happening. There's not even an officers' club at Fort Carson anymore.
We would also host other vet nonprofits hey, use our space for free. Mm-hmm. Team Red, White, and Blue, Team Rubicon, all of them, because one, we're in this together, right? I'm very proud that Post 1 is the hub of the veteran community. But also, look, you can only hump a chainsaw for so many years until you're going to age out of that. Hey, I remember Post 1 from my Team Rubicon days. We were playing a long game.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. What about, how does that parallel with executive recruiting, finding those purple squirrels?
Yeah, I guess because, in 2001, I hung out my shingle to start my own search firm. Mm-hmm. And so, I cold call for a living. I do outbound calls. I'm always looking for new clients, new candidates. So I always had kind of that outgoing methodology. And so I applied that to the Post, for sponsorships and partner development and recruiting members to the Post. You fast forward through all of this and, the Post got a lot of accolades locally and nationally. We were small nonprofit of the year. We got on front page of the New York Times, and some other major publications nationally. And I got, the Post got known. I got known in the local community, and I did wonder, how do I struggle for the right word, parlay, leverage, transition, whatever, into the search work. Because my wife will tell you, one, she was a Post 1 widow. but leading the Post was supposed to be a part-time volunteer job, and it turned into a full-time volunteer job. But I wouldn't trade that for anything. I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I soaked in every minute of it. I learned a lot. And there's those skills of community building, event planning that I'm able to leverage now into my day job. And this is a long story. Hope you guys don't mind. I think you're long format, but
well, we will be now if it's a long story.
Yeah. Well, but this VFWs are all 501c19s. So it's a nonprofit, but it's veteran specific. American Legion, Vietnam Veterans of America. So individually, it's tax deductible donation. But for our capital campaign to renovate the building, foundations only give to C3s. So I created the Post One Foundation as a C3 to raise money for his capital campaign. And so last summer, we hit $2 million on the capital campaign. And phase one of the renovations are complete. I mean, we've got no longer indoor privy. They've got bathrooms that, will make, you want to salute in pride. And so I started thinking, we created, the foundation shifted to Leadership Veteran. So what we do is we partner with DU, and we provide nonprofit management education to those who work and volunteer in the veteran nonprofit or a veteran program. And then we also give you business skills, and we bring in thought leaders from the local nonprofit community for fireside chats so they can hear directly from grantors. And we bring in CEOs to talk about strategic planning or how to delegate, because we want you to take this information back to your nonprofit so your nonprofit thrives, so you're better serving veterans. And so as I was transitioning from leading the foundation to being the board chair, I took all of those skill sets and I volunteered with a local business group, a chapter called ACG, Association of Corporate Growth. So it's a business community that focuses on middle market. Companies that are 10 million to 500 million. Sometimes it goes up to $1 billion, depending on your definition of middle market. And so, I help them with their lunch and learns and their breakfast panel discussions. So I'll bring in CEOs to be a panelist. And so I'm seeing that skill set migrate from the VFW days into now my day job. In fact, we started a few minutes late today because my breakfast meeting was through ACG that we were collaborating together on breakfast C-level events that we're now starting to talk about. Okay, what searches can I do for your company? Do you see it? Did you see that migration, that journey? Yeah. So I also put together, I call it Veterans in the C-Suite. It's a quarterly networking event. Colorado we're fortunate that we have such a vibrant veteran community, but I don't think people realize how many of them are in the C-Suite. So the first one we held with JP Morgan, we collaborated with JP Morgan on it. We had like 27 C-level executives who are veterans attend, and we're already planning for the next one. It's going to be a quarterly series. In fact, on my podcast, CXO Conversations, I'm about to start a Veterans in the C-Suite series.
That's awesome.
So the long answer, but that's how I've migrated. What's the word I'm looking for? That's how
I think you were right with the parlayed or it naturally happened. I think, there's a whole lot of, if I put on my coaching hat, there's a whole lot of things going on there. But
the thing for me is I don't think of something in one single lane. When I'm talking to somebody or whatever, I'm thinking multiple levels. How can I help them? That's the first thing you start off with. How can this person, is this a resource I can leverage, utilize for the veteran community, for Post One Foundation, the search work, or for ACG? Because to me, this all circles back around. It all does come together into one lane. It really does. I mean, ACG, when I tried to get involved with them, the first person I called on the board was Brad, because he was a vet. He's a vet. Whenever I look at a company or a foundation or a board or whatever, I look to see who the vet is, and that's my first phone call.
Yeah, I do the exact same thing. I go through and look at the board, look at the leadership, and go, oh, veteran. That's the person I'm going to contact. That's the person I'm going to, engage with. You're right. There's, and I'll go back to one of the things that I heard, and I think is really, now I can't think of the right word, really cool. I'll just say cool because I can't think of the fancy word I was trying to come up with, is the fact that it was a natural, it wasn't, at least what I just heard, it wasn't an intentional thing. Well, I'm going to get involved with VFW because it's going to help my business. It was
Going back to Camden's earlier question.
Yeah.
That's what people did. They joined the VFW because back then you did business with people you had commonalities with, right? That's what the Elks and Rotary is all about. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why my grandfather used to go to those. That's why he was a member of the Masonics. I got his Masonics handbook up here, and that was, get out of the house and all those sort of things too. But when you got involved with VFW, it was that passion project that you saw a problem that you could help and fix. And I think that's what's cool. And then the realization that, well, I'm the same person, and these things start to pull together. And that's a powerful statement.
I mean, you go in our archives, because we have archives going back to 1899. In fact, we have an American flag that was hand sewn in the year that Colorado became a state, right?
Oh.
But I found newspaper clippings from the 50s and the 40s, in the Denver Post announcing, here's the new officers of VFW Post 1. The National VFW Commander-in-Chief is coming to Denver to visit Post 1. Now, fast forward to today, it's unfortunately the best kept secret. Really? Post 1's the first one? It's in Denver?
Hark, let the cat out of the bag for me, or otherwise, this conversation would have been me learning about that too, because I was just like, oh, this is the first one in Colorado.
Oh yeah, and see, I'm an opportunist. Hark, right? Hark's the former COO of Bunker Labs, a national nonprofit organization that supports veteran entrepreneurs. When he rolled off that to do his own business in last fall, the headhunter in me kicked in. I grabbed him, and he's on my steering committee for Leadership Veteran. Absolutely. You don't think I'm going to let that pitch go by? All that resource, all that knowledge, all that experience? Oh, hell yes, I'm grabbing that.
Talking about, community building, makes me think back to our conversations we had with lots of other vets, but specifically I'm thinking with Scott Mann, and, talking about how do we help to not only just build up the veteran community within itself, but then also integrating it with the civilians and all those kind of things. And I always love to ask, because it's a freaking messy problem, and there's lots of variables and those kind of things. So to try to get rid of some of those variables, I like to think of it those magic wand solutions. So Michael, what would be your magic wand solution to help the veteran community? When you talk about community building, and you could talk locally with Post 1 or on the national level, just if you could change one thing magically, what would it be?
Oh, within the veteran community?
Not necessarily,
or
more so
you
could take it either way, but more so of providing that community building aspect, whether it's integration with civilians, also just in the veteran community, whatever way you want to take it.
Well, I'm going to be a little biased and say Leadership Veterans, that magic wand, right? Because, not only are we providing this nonprofit management education, but we're also bringing different veteran nonprofits together to collaborate. So you're in housing and you're over here, you got one that's in housing, one that's in mental health, and your mental health person says, you're in a housing crisis. I know someone over here in housing, right? So you cross-refer. We did that Post 1. And, we hope that will scale nationally, but that's because I'm biased towards Leadership Veterans. But I think ultimately people want to support you, right? I get calls from foundations saying, it's end of the year, we got extra money. We want to give it to veterans. Who can we give it to? I think people think that when they apply for grants or they need money from a partnership or whatever level, that it's hard and you go to them hat in hand. It goes back to outreach. Call them, introduce yourself, and say, look, this is what we're doing. Is this something you could, you want to partner together? And some are going to say no. But most people want to figure out how they can help to some degree. It could be small. You can say, hey, I need 10 grand. Well, I got 500. Great, I'll take it. And we'll build on that relationship from there. It's all about outreach and bringing people together. I mean, that's ultimately all I can offer, right? There is no magic wand to solve anything. It's a complex issue. Everyone has different stories, different backgrounds, different issues that they're dealing with, or people want to get involved with the veteran nonprofit either as to provide service or to receive service. And so where does that person, or sometimes both.
I like that idea, and I wonder if that's maybe the way ahead for VFW, larger is to be that go-to veteran resource.
I think that maybe as we talk this out, the best piece of advice I can give is when you're this is more of an imagery thing, but when you're working a table at an event, get out from behind it, get in front of the table, just put your hand down, shake, and say hi. When people are. I understand not everyone's comfortable asking for money or calling someone, right? But when you're talking to another vet, it's not a cold call. No. You already have something in common. Harvard, Yale, suck it, bitches. We're part of the best Ivy League alumni out there. I'm serious. Yeah. When we talk to people about recruiting new members, they're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, you see someone wearing an Army ball cap or a veteran ball cap, go say hi. All you have to do is say, hey, I'm a vet too. I was in Navy. Sorry you couldn't get in the Navy and you had to go in the Army.
Yeah, second choice. Yeah, because
no, I'm serious. Just go say hello. There's your answer, Cameron. Say hello. Start from there.
I gotta say that this reminds me a lot of our conversation with James Corbett with Project Refit. It's everyone wants to help and they see these problems and so they want to go. I want to sign $1 million check to you, Michael. So I'm going to wait 20 years until I have $1 million and then I'm going to give it to you. It's like, no, do something today. Just do anything you can to help to try to inch that way forward instead of waiting so you can do the big thing. This episode of the Cam and Otis Show is brought to you by Tribe and Purpose. Are you tired of dealing with the costs of bad leadership? It's time to make a change. The Green Beret Leadership Program is your key to unlocking the full potential of your team. By developing leaders in your business, you'll get a proactive and responsible team that embraces challenges, takes calculated risks, and takes action without constant supervision. Developing great leaders can take a lot of time and energy. And that's why businesses tend to opt for the trial by fire or school of hard knocks path to leadership. The truth is that wastes time and money and puts a lot of extra stress on your leadership team. Poor leadership drives away quality talent, and the longer you wait to fix the problem, the more talent you're going to lose. With the Green Beret Leadership Program, you can use the battle-tested leadership principles of the Green Berets to develop great leaders in your team faster than with the School of Hard Knocks. You'll see changes in just a few short weeks. The longer you wait to take action, the more damage poor leadership can do to your business. Learn more about the impact GBLP can have on your business and schedule your free coaching call with your Green Beret coach, Otis, now at findyourpurpose.coach/GBLP. That's findyourpurpose.coach/GBLP. Don't leave your team to struggle on their own. Give them the tools they need to be great.
Right. Oh, I play the long game. I've got a patron. Okay. So again, real nerd inside baseball here. I really enjoy reading 990s. For those who don't know what a 990 is, it's the nonprofit equivalent of a 1040 tax filing, right? So if you bring in more than $50,000, you have to file a complete 990. If it's less than that, it's a postcard. But at any rate, one day I was reading one and I was like, okay, who is this, foundation giving money to, or who did they receive money from? And I was reading the one who was receiving money from, and I see this line in there. It was a very distinctive name. I'm like, how many of these people could be in the state of Colorado? Because there was a person with the same name that was my attorney when I started my business in 2001. Okay. And I call her up. She's like, oh yeah, that foundation's my parents. I'm on the board. And I got 10,000 from her. And another 10 each year. I clockwork. I know I'm going to get $10,000. And I've gotten $10,000 from her for what? 9 years.
Wow.
And then I've gotten a $50,000 grant from her and a $21,000 grant from her for our arts program. Right? I mean, that's a long-term valued relationship. Sure, I was raising $1 million and I got 10 from her, but now we're north of 150. Mm-hmm. And then, one of my board members brought in Martin Marietta for concrete. It was like $5,500. And he was like, I'm sorry I didn't get more. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm dancing in the streets because one, it's a new relationship. It's a new logo we can put on the website and all of our collateral. And it's a logo we can take to another company and say, hey, get on board a winning team. No one really wants to be the first, but when you got wind in the sail, there's a saying: failures are orphans, success has many fathers. Right? There you go. Just build on it. You get $500 from the local tile dealership. I'm dancing in the street because then I build on that.
And that's so true. I think that's, not just in a raise for a nonprofit or a foundation like that. That goes for business seeds.
Yeah.
Getting a seed round with your business. I had this conversation with a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago. We'll have him on the show soon, Jay Jesse, and we were talking about that. And with one of my startups, we're just talking about the fundraise and stuff like that. And he's like, "Yeah, you can go and try to get that." Write a check, get somebody to write that check for $500, $1 million, or you can work towards a here's the stage I need, and then take the money in and say what you're doing with that money in much smaller steps, and it's a much more realistic approach. Because go back to what you were talking about when you were working that job in New York, hunting for those whales. Well, you know what? The ocean ain't full of whales. It's got a lot of tuna in it. Caught some the other day. Ha ha ha! I got to throw that out there. Yes, it was a very successful fishing trip. But the point is, you can go hunting for whales and spend a lot of time out in the ocean. That's a big blue ocean looking for that one thing. Or you can start to gather it in and collect and get enough to eat, survive, and be successful.
And
when I first became when I first became the commander of Post 1, I did a couple things I did immediately. Is I started using the term executive director, because when you go in the business community, nobody knows what commander means. They'll have a different connotation. And again, I was treating Post 1 as a nonprofit, not a VFW Post. And I immediately joined the Denver Chamber of Commerce. And the first event I went to was Ball Aerospace was there, and I got $5,000 out of them for our founders dinner. My very first interaction with the chamber. I'm like, all right, this is working, right? And I just built on that. Sure, it's only $5,000, right? And it depends on how you value that $5,000. For what our cost was for founders, it was a good chunk, but it didn't pay for everything. And for others, it'd be a windfall. But I built on that, because then I go shopping around and say, hey, by the way, here's on your fundraising material, your sponsorship decks, there's the Ball Aerospace logo. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. I mean, a recognized brand. Yeah. Well, it builds trust for the others, right? They go, oh, well, you've got that. I mean, it's the same thing. I'll go back to this, raising funds for a business. It's like, hey, I've got this venture capital firm or this person, it's not mom and dad writing a check. It's this person here that's written a check. That already established that trust and value that, somebody else believes in it. So yeah,
$5,000. I'll do $5,000 all day long. For me, that's meat and potatoes. Absolutely.
I just wanted to add real quick, we're talking about like the fundraising and these big goals and then the smaller pieces underneath it. There's also a really interesting like incentive thing that you can use there, because when you're donating something smaller and you tie it to something, it doesn't feel small. Like I think back to with the Engage Foundation, we're getting ready for our fall rugby season. If I go to somebody and I'm asking for thousands of dollars to run this whole program, it's a little bit abstract. If I go to Otis and I say I need $50 to get a kid a cleats and jersey, you get that $50 because you can understand it's so much more concrete. And I think that's the advantage of those smaller price tags. Sometimes you can make it more concrete.
Yeah, I will say that kind of reminds me. The one thing I struggled with, because kind of like fundraising 101 is the heartstring, right? Give to the Children's Hospital because Timmy needs a heart surgery, right?
Yeah.
And that's what gets people to open up, right? But when I was fundraising for the Post, I do not pimp out the veterans. I just won't do it, right? I mean, we do have some situations, right?
Yeah.
Because not everyone has come back and readjusted like everybody else. But I will not, because I will not pimp them out, their misery or their situation. And has that cost me money? Probably, but I just won't frickin' do it. Right? Well, and I have testimonies from veterans who say, look, this program literally saved my life. Great. But you'll never find our material.
I think in my mind's eye of what VFW is, I think that's where it should be. Is it's not that, because that's not what the VFW is. The VFW is a fraternal organization. It's a community organization. Those other organizations that do that, let them put the picture up and have the video of the guy. I think, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier about how the VFW could be that community resource for all veteran nonprofits, veteran programs that exist. Because one of the things that I get, the feedback I get all the time from veterans is there's so much, I don't know where to start.
Yeah, and the thing is, because you guys earlier had asked, how did all this help me with my business, right? And I've mentioned past in the podcast. So I started this podcast in 19, and part of it was to get in front of potential clients, right? I need to stand out. I need, my buyer of my services are CEOs and CFOs and board members. Okay. Primarily. And so I need to get a way to get in front of them to separate myself from what I call scrubs. I mean, my industry is, there is no licensing. Anyone can say I'm a recruiter. Doesn't make it so, right? But something changed along the way. And yes, I've gotten clients because of it. It's kind of my own personal MBA. I understand more of what it's like being a CEO or a CFO. And I think a lot of people have these perceptions that if you're a CEO, you know it all. You're at the top of your game. Oh, no. Far from it. Yeah. Right. And these commonalities quickly emerged on how they became into the C-suite. And I find just endlessly fascinating. And it's helped me both as a business owner to be better, but also help me do my searches better and relate with potential candidates better. I've learned a lot. And the one commonality is that people raise their hand. Don't wait to be told, right? I mean, if you're a small business owner, you like owning your own destiny. Being a small business owner is all about peaks and valleys. And on my deepest valley, and trust me, we've all been there and we've all had them, I never once said, I need to go find a job. Never. I'd still rather be my own skipper.
And there's a lot of power to that, and that's awesome. And man, when I'm looking at my notes trying to figure out what I learned, there's a lot of cheap ones in there. What the hell a 990 is? That was like, okay. But that's, maybe you should see a doctor about that one though. I just, in my medical opinion, if you enjoy reading those, that's a.
Oh, well, see, I'm a junkie for cold calling. I really am. So if I have a bad day, my home base is cold calling. I'm not exaggerating. I'm serious. I'll if someone says I do 200 cold calls a day, one, bullshit. Two, you're not talking to anybody and you're leaving 3-second voicemails, right? You're just get out of the room, just leave, go away. For me, a good day is 30 cold calls. Those are meaningful cold calls, right? Outreach, whether it's a voicemail, ideally you want to talk to somebody, right? And then you got the follow-ups. But I enjoy it because you never know where that next call is going to go. Is that person going to be a candidate? Is that person going to refer a potential candidate to me, a prospect? I've gotten clients that way. Look, if you're cold calling me, I need you to work for me. I've literally had that happen. And it's also a superpower I've leveraged for fundraising for my vet community. But it's an opportunity to create a relationship. Yeah. Don't view it as a barrier, view it as an opportunity.
Oh, that's so spot on too. Because I did a cold call job. I didn't get to the point where you are, where I accepted it, but I did it. It was a great experience to learn about. But I will say that a lot of trivia in here, and I'm gonna go with for what I learned, the fact that Post One in Denver is the first post. I mean, that's really a cool heritage to have, and have it just up the road. I went to an event there. Drew, dang it, I can't remember what Drew's last name is. Drew hosted something there. Drew's a real estate guy.
Drew Morris.
Drew Morris, yes. He hosted something there a while back. That's my first time in the building, so that was really cool. Probably only like the third or fourth time I've ever been in a VFW Post. So,
how long ago was that?
It was within the last year. It wasn't that
So,
long.
were there nice bathrooms?
Oh yeah,
Yeah. So that's post phase one renovation.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's a bar there too, but we didn't.
That's
use
a saloon. That's a saloon. Thank you very
saloon.
much.
Sorry.
So that saloon has a lot of history. So when I designed it, I wanted to incorporate who we are. So if you notice, it says John Stewart, Army of the Philippines, Camp Number 1. That's who we were when we started in 1899.
Mm-hmm.
15 years later, we merged with two other vet orgs to become today's VFW. And then there's a rail that we got from Union Pacific, and it was poured, it was molded. Whatever you do with steel, during World War I in Pueblo.
Oh wow!
And then the stained glass on the back of the saloon is the original logo of Army of the Philippines. So we purposely wanted to incorporate our history.
That is cool. Now I have to go back because I have vague memories of it, but I don't remember those details. So that's awesome.
And that charter is the original charter from 1899.
That's pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Like you said, lots of little trivia things. So I'm ready for my next trivia night at the local bar here or something. But no, the never again volunteer yourself as the acronym for the Navy. I had not heard that one before. I guess there's not that many Navy vets here in Arizona, so maybe that's part of it. But I thought that was real funny.
Michael, how about you? What'd you learn?
Well, I really never thought about how, the way Camden asked about how I really parlayed all that into my day job. But I guess I have. I'm still figuring it out, but I'm getting closer. I think the vets in the C-suite really is, because again, there's more, sure for my business, but also right there. I mean, I got one of a new board member for the foundation out of it. So again, multi-level.
That's cool. Awesome. Michael, how do folks find you, connect with you, meet up with you at the VFW Post 1?
Yeah, no. First off, if you're interested in nonprofit education, live here along the Front Range. And by the way, we got people all the way from Fort Collins, Longmont, out to Fort Morgan, down the Springs, applying for the program. Go to leadershipveteran.org. I'm not proud. I'll plug that. On LinkedIn, you can find me at Michael Mitchell with 1L out of Denver. And then, of course, check out my podcast, CXO Conversations. That's at ocns.co.
Awesome. Michael, this has been great, man. I really enjoyed hanging out with you today and just partaking in your passion to help veterans.
Well, I hope I didn't gab too much.
No.
That's the whole point.
Just the right amount. Yeah.
Well, I'm proud of Post 1. I rep it all day long, right? I got my talking points down. But also I interview for a living, so I'm not shy.
Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to the Cam and Otis Show. And a special thanks to our guest, Michael Mitchell, for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to pass along to someone else so they can enjoy it too. Make sure to follow the Cam and Otis Show on Facebook and Instagram, and you can watch full videos of the show on our YouTube page. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button too. As always, the full archive of our episodes is available at www.camandotisshow.com. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.